Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the video series on the 5 functions of developing a theory of change. This series is produced by the Capacity Building Center for States and funded by the Children's Bureau. In this module, we're going to break down the 4th function in developing a theory of change, defining actions. Remember, at this point, a team has the problem statement, root causes, target population, and long-term outcome in hand. They've taken the time to develop the pathway of change, or the things that need to happen before the long-term outcome can be achieved. In this video, we will talk about defining the actions that will help create the changes needed before moving on to document assumptions and rationale. Let's get started. Defining actions helps a team define what needs to happen to bring about the needed changes in both the short and long-term outcomes. While it is an important step in developing a theory of change, it is also a preliminary step to the work teams will do later to identify an intervention. Actions, or what needs to happen before each causal link can take place, help teams continue to build their understanding of the root causes of the problem and begin thinking about important elements of potential interventions. It is important to note that teams are not yet identifying an intervention or program, but more so thinking critically about what might need to be included in one. During this step, teams may also recognize a need for additional resources or partnerships to think through potential actions for each causal link and how to best achieve them. Teams can start the process of defining actions for the causal links through brainstorming sessions. It may take more than one session to consider all of the actions for a pathway, especially if the theory of change is particularly complex or involves multiple root causes. In the pathway of change, causal links build upon one another. Teams look at each causal link in the pathway in order and consider the actions needed for each. This helps teams understand what actions need to take place at each causal link and see the connections between causal links. For example, are the actions for causal link 1 dependent on one another? Are the actions for causal link 2 dependent on those for causal link number 1? Understanding these relationships helps a team coordinate efforts and complete actions in the best order. While defining the actions needed for the theory of change, consider the following questions. Does each action defined have a cause and effect relationship with a causal link or outcome in the pathway? For example, if the team does X, the action, will Y, the causal link or outcome, be achieved? Teams should also answer whether there are any barriers that may prevent the action from taking place. And if so, think about what resources or partnerships may be needed to achieve these actions. Answering these questions together as a team will help ensure that the theory of change is understandable, achievable, and supports a clear pathway to change. Let's take a moment to check in on the example from the brief. The team looking at the causal link expand qualifications in order to get a broader pool of candidates for positions identified 3 potential actions that would help them address the causal link: to examine their existing qualification requirements, to research the national standards, and to modify the agency's requirements. Remember, the team is not yet looking for interventions, but the actions that might achieve change. The team will also need to define actions for all of the remaining causal links in the theory of change to have a comprehensive understanding of the actions that will ensure success. The team has gathered the information they need, identified a long-term outcome, and developed the pathway of change. Once they have completely defined the actions for each causal link in the pathway, then they will be on their way to having a sound theory of change. What do you think might be their next step? The next and final step in developing a theory of change is documenting assumptions and rationale. Let's take a moment to check in on what we've learned about defining actions. Why do teams define actions? To continue to build understanding of what might help, consider what needs to be in an intervention and what resources might help. How do teams define actions? By brainstorming the steps or activities needed for each causal link to take place, looking at each link in the pathway individually. What can help teams to define actions? Making sure there is a cause and effect relationship between actions and causal links or outcomes, and considering the barriers and resources needed for them to occur. As a reminder, revisit the reflection activities in your Theory of Change workbook on Define Actions to connect what you've learned to your own experience. Up next is Document Assumptions and Rationale, the fifth and final function in developing a theory of change.